So one of the things you can do in your garden to encourage natural enemies is to have plenty of flowers. And that's one of the reasons that we thought this would be a great garden to come and look in, is because there's plenty of flowers. The reason that flowers are important is that they provide a food source for parasitoids. Does everyone know what a parasitoid is? Yeah, an insect that lays its eggs in other insects. Yeah, they do. Okay, so an adult parasitoid don't feed on the host. So they get all their nutrient from sugars and sometimes pollen that they're taking out of flowers. Now, if you can imagine, you have a huge crop of wheat, say, and you've got aphids in there. The parasitoids might go in and find the aphids and start controlling them, but eventually they're going to need to go and get some food, so they have to fly all the way out of the field to get that nutrient, and then you hope that they come back in. If you've got them all mixed in together, the parasitoid doesn't have to go very far and you get better control. And that's the idea behind a lot of the sort of variety and biodiversity and how well it works in IPM. There's a lot of work going on with people including floral nectary sources into their crops. There was quite a bit of that in the presentation I gave last year, so if anyone's interested in finding out more, Tara, you had some, oh no, sorry, I think it, did you? Some of the booklets still there. So anyone who didn't attend last year, I think there's probably half a dozen books left. If you want to sort of flick through those and have a bit of a look. So as we walk through the garden, have a look out for insects. Have a look in that sheet, see if you can see anything that you see on that sheet, apart from bees. And yeah, give us a hoy and we can have a chat about it. Let's keep going. Mm-hmm. So a while ago, Derek set up a banana weevil borer trap here. And yesterday we came and we found some banana weevils in it. So if we can have someone with good eyes, where's that young fella? He seems to be able to see everything. So basically what you do is you set these up, and then every 2 or 3 days you can just turn them over. And
it's just the banana cut in half, nothing else.
Yeah, nothing else at all. So once you cut a banana tree and you've got this pseudo stem, a great use for it is to make these traps.
What's that?
Well, that is a Nemertean worm, or I think some people call them planarial worms, and they feed on mollusks, so they can feed on slugs, snails, and at times earthworms. And I don't know a lot about them, but that was my belief for ages, and I actually had a look this morning to see what they feed on. And they can feed on insects and all sorts of things.
So whereabouts is that, Anthony?
This is it here.
Oh, down there. Oh, yeah.
Ooh,
And they're fairly common where the ground's moist and there's food sources. So, I mean, it's easy to assume that it's eaten that snail, but we don't really have any evidence for it. Interestingly, and I've read this a long time ago, so my memory may not be 100% right, but I'm pretty sure that some of these worms from Tasmania have found their way into the British Isles, and they're causing problems by eating all their worms. Yeah, I couldn't find it this morning. I looked for it again, so there's plenty of them here. Yeah. So that could be beneficial or not beneficial depending on what it eats, but there really is a whole heap of them.
But
No banana weevil?
No, we got them yesterday. I've got them pinned so I can. Oh, there's one.
So what would you do with them if you find them?
I'd probably try and if it was my place, I'd try and confirm what it is they're eating. Are you talking about the worms?
No, the weevils.
Oh,
if you find like a heap of banana weevils in there, what do you do with them? Get rid of the crop.
I would keep at it till you don't get any more. Kill them, put them in a container, put them in the freezer.
Oh, so you hand pick them out basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. Section of banana. Yeah,
And then keep going, and you can keep taking them out the population because they have a very low rate of reproduction, and they almost flightless. I believe they can fly, but there's very little evidence to say that they commonly fly to spread. So if you're constantly taking them out of the population, there's a much better chance that you won't have any negative effects from them.
Have we got a guesstimate at this stage as to how far they are prepared to travel? Yeah?
I would assume they don't, and I would run a management program assuming they don't. When they travel, it's usually in infested planting material.
Okay, so you could potentially have some at one end of your property, and at the other end of your property you could plant some clean material.
Depending on how big your
And
property was,
hopefully,
and assume
hopefully
that they're
they
not going to. Yeah. You'd need a fair bit of distance, I'd imagine.
100 metres?
I would guess so. Yeah.
I know it's something we don't quite know.
See that
Anyone else seen any?
worm has a big flat head.
I reckon it's come from Tasmania, do you?
No.
No.
Must be one similar.
Yeah.
So you,
Oh yeah, you can have it.
so you keep doing that until you don't.
That's what I would do.
Yeah.
It's not viable in a commercial situation, but in a place like this, I'd every time I cut down a banana, I'd put some out. Now, a couple of times a year in the spring and in late summer, the weevils, they're a bit more active just after rain, and they'll come out of pupation and looking for mates, especially early in the spring and then later in the summer. And if you can get them before they've mated and lay eggs, you're still taking more out of the population. So,
What do they do to the actual?
oh, well, we're actually hoping to find that out and demonstrate it. So we're going to cut them open and see if we can find some larvae in the stem. So what they do, the larvae burrow into the stem in the corm down here underneath. Actually, it's not the stem, it's in the corm underneath here. And they tunnel through it, and a big infestation. They can make the banana fall over in wind, and they just reduce its ill thrift. Basically, they can just suffer from ill thrift. Just don't do very well.
To cut the stem in half and put it face down. Is that
Yes.
the way to trap them?
Yes. Yep.
And how long can you keep reusing these before you need to replace them?
Well, to be honest, I think they're looking a bit tired now.
Okay. So you want them to be fresh.
Yes. Yeah.
Just stand clear while Nathan cuts this open, looking for a larvae.
Chop through the middle there.
Maybe slice these that way,
Yes.
and then about an inch apart maybe. And
Yeah.
expose a larvae. Oh, just a camera and a drink.
Has everyone seen the banana weevil?
Yeah.
Yeah.
White sapote. Yeah. Casimira. Dried it.
Everyone seen banana weevil?
We haven't got bananas in Tasmania.
So we've got an example of the damage that the larvae do. You can see they've been burrowing into the corm here, and in some situations in a big wind, if you've got enough tunnelling in here, it can just fall out. We're hoping to find some larvae so that you could see what they look like, but we haven't found any yet. You can take a sucker and you can clean off most of the root ball, the root corm, and if you can get it right down so you can be really confident that there's no damage, it's much safer to move that if you're going to. It's probably, if you can avoid doing it, would be better.
Yeah.
But it's turning up, now that people are using more of these traps, more and more people are finding that they actually do have the banana weevil borer. So maybe it's just something that we've all got to live with, and you know, if you need to start new bananas, you've got to start with corms that might have them in it.
Yeah.
We're pretty savage. We cut a lot of the root ball off it, and I found out on the aeroplane on the way over here that it's actually growing.
Okay.
So
So
yeah.
without any of the root ball?
Well,
So
well,
you cut it above.
we'll have a demonstration if we can. Derek, could we?
Yeah.
You got a pup there we could
Hand it
cut
back
off,
to
and
Nathan.
where'd he go?
Here, just behind you.
Oh, could we maybe?
Yeah, right, Nathan. Yeah.
Which is one that you would pick to move if you were going to
first
move
like
one
that?
and start a new?
Probably that one.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
I'll go get the big chop.
When the weevil lays its eggs, it's usually around, just around this, very low down, around where the stem turns into the root ball. And if you cut it all as much as you can off, you can treat them in hot water, you can dip them in pesticide, but I'm not sure there's anything actually registered for use, so you'd have to check that.
So with the hot water treatment, you
Yes,
dip it in hot water for about 30 seconds.
I think it is about 20 to 30 seconds, yeah, depending on where you
butter and
live.
salt to taste and serve immediately.
And then put your bananas in.
But that will shoot roots.
Yes. Yeah, we did this last year, and one of the local fellas wasn't that convinced, so he planted it, and it's growing. I found out on the aeroplane on the way over here, someone told me that
I
the
do my
banana.
darndest to keep as many roots on them as I can.
Yeah,
If it's the wrong
yeah. Well, if you're confident you don't have weevil borer, then you'll get away with it. It's
Yeah,
it's
sure,
fine.
sure.
But yeah,
This definitely slows it down, I think.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
yeah, oh, it
the
does.
last
It
time,
does.
yeah.
We'll definitely slow it down. Yeah.
But if it gives you a clean crop.
Yeah. You're only starting in a new place, so. So the avocado spotting bug, similar to lots of other spotting bugs, they'll, if they sting small fruit, they'll quite often drop the fruit, and
okay.
there'd be a lot of damage that is probably going unnoticed because they'll just drop to the ground. And when they've been fed on, that white sap comes out that looks to us like one that's been fed on.
So that's where the insect has put its probe in
Yeah,
and sucked some of that sap out.
yeah,
And the
then
avocado makes the
It
stone
reacts by
to,
exuding that to seal the wound
yeah.
so that
protect
it
the
doesn't
fruit.
destroy the whole fruit.
Oh, so they're not like laying an egg in there?
No.
No.
Feeding. Ah.
Yeah. And so it's not known how many times they will actually feed during a day, but if they did that to every
Yeah.
avocado
Oh, they're a
each
bucket.
month,
They're a
you
bucket.
can lose 10 avocados a day that get those stones in them.
So how do you stop that? Like, what's the... Just find the bug and
You get ants brochure and
it's a very difficult question. There's two other spotting bugs from the same genus on the east coast in the fruit growing districts, and there's an enormous amount of pesticide sprayed prophylactically to manage it in big orchards. It's one of the worst, it's one of the most difficult pests to control, and if you've got if you're working with a grower who has this issue and you're having to spray, the rest of your IPM pretty well goes out the window, because you can't establish an IPM program on the back of continual spraying.
Are there any natural predators?
There are. There's a parasitic wasp. It's called Anastatus. I don't think it's actually described as a species, but it's available commercially on the mainland. You can buy it, and in some situations it works really well, and in some situations it doesn't work at all well, and you're wasting your time trying to control it. The problem you guys have is we don't. I would imagine it probably doesn't occur here, and if you were to jump through all the hoops and introduce it, you'd have no idea of the collateral damage that could be caused to your native species. So it's just a direction I wouldn't go in. It's you've got a lot of native butterflies here that could be at risk from it. So yeah, probably not a good idea.
So where do they breed, Anne?
These?
Yeah, in the soil or on?
No, on the tree. So the female will come in.
On the tree.
Yeah. Yeah, she'll lay her eggs individually around various places on the tree, and they just hatch and feed. They'll also feed on the shoots. I'm not sure about the avocado spotting bug, to be honest, but other ones in the genus will feed on the shoots as well.
So it's not only sucking the fruit juice out, it's virtually any sap.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially on those young flushing leaves.
Yeah.
I've seen some damage on a couple of leaves.
Yeah, and mangoes as well.
Yeah.
Similar damage on the mangoes.
Probably worse on the stems.
Yeah.
It can cause splitting of
Yeah.
the stem
Yeah.
Wow.
below where the fruit attaches. Long splits, an inch to an inch and a half long.
Yeah.
And you get the wax mark there as well. You get that same
Yes,
wax
you
mark
do
on
get that
Okay.
latex oozing from the sap of the mango.
Yeah.
Did you describe the life cycle going through the different instar?
No, I'll leave it to you.
No, you're the...
So I think there's about 4 instars. So they lay their eggs and hatch, and that one that we've been passing around, I'm guessing, is a second instar. So the first instar is quite a bit smaller. They slowly get at each molt. So they molt between instars. Instars is it's just a term used for a stage. So you can have, if they have say 4 molts, you can have I think with it 5 instars. So they molt between instars, and because an insect has an exoskeleton, it can't grow slowly, so it tends to molt when it really has to, sheds its exoskeleton, puffs its, sometimes they'll puff themselves up and dry out, and then they'll sort of grow to feel that, and then they'll shed the skin again, and that's how the process works. These are what they call hemimetabolous, which means they have it's like a half change. Holometabolists are insects that have a whole change, like caterpillars. It's a complete change from a caterpillar to a butterfly. These they call hemimetabolists because they're changing slowly. So the young ones, the first instars, don't look much like the adults, but as they get older, they start to grow wing buds. At each molt, they get slightly bigger till their final molt.
The wing phase is the adult phase then.
Yeah. At each instar, they get little wing buds. So probably 3rd and 4th instars, the wing buds are getting bigger, and when the adults emerge, they have complete wings. So it's only the adults that can fly. So one of the projects, the citizen science projects that we're going to be talking about after lunch today, is going to be involved in looking at alternative hosts for this pest, and just to see what the phenology is. Phenology is it's a study of the seasonality and changes that plants go through. In fact, everything pretty well has a phenology. I think technically it's the study of seasonality. So the project's going to be looking at things like feijoa and guava, wild guava, so we can try and get an overview of what's flowering and what's suitable for both spotting bug and guava moth. So we get an idea of, if you have an orchard where these pests occur, or you have a garden where these pests occur, what's happening outside it. So if you control them here, are they just flying in? And the idea is, the sort of idea behind it all is, if we can find a gap where there are no other hosts, and the guava moth especially, there's no evidence to say that it will estivate. Estivates are a very similar process to diapause, which is similar again to hibernation, and it just means it goes into a suspended development stage. Lots of insects do it, but we don't think the guava moth does. There's no evidence to suggest that it does. So in a situation where you've got the moth that has to keep cycling, if we can find a place in the phenology of all its hosts where there's a gap, then it might allow us to target that host to control it so you can reduce the population and just get less damage in your garden. Guava moth is something we haven't actually mentioned. Does everyone know what guava moth is? There's another fact sheet on that we're talking about this afternoon. It's an interesting beast actually. It lays its eggs in fruit, guava, citrus. You guys don't grow apples here, do you? No. You do? Yeah. Yeah. Well, it lays its eggs. It's got quite a wide host range. It's native. It's an Australian native, but it's not a pest where it's known to occur. It got here, and it got to New Zealand, I think, in the late 90s, and they've done a lot of research on it. And as soon as it gets away from its suite of natural enemies, it's become a real pest. So there's not much really known about it. So as part of that citizen science project, we're going to try and get some information on the suitability of other hosts. So I guess I'll stop there. Anyone any questions about that? The theory around lacewing eggs being laid on stalks is that when a lacewing larvae hatches, it runs around and it just attacks everything. Everything within a certain size range, it'll just attack it. So they put their eggs up on stalks so that their siblings, when they hatch, they'll go down a stalk and unlikely to climb up and eat another egg. That's a theory of whether
brother or sister.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
So hopefully they'll run away before.
Yeah.
That looks like citrus scab to me, but it's a disease, and I know little about it.
On the orange tree.
Yeah.
Is that going to be another little LBM?
Certainly looks like one.
Yep.
Yeah. You can rear it out and see what colour it is. It might be a LGM.
Ooh. Ooh.
Could be a little green moth.
Shall I just leave it here to see?
Have a look at this one.
That's one
This
thing
is
about
where
the
caterpillars
veggies in the
comes in.
veggie pod, which
Oh,
we haven't
okay.
got now.
Have a look in
They
here.
didn't have any of this insect down
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
because the flying
Which is
ones
better than
couldn't
eating
Yeah.
the rest
Yes.
of it.
Yeah.
Funnily enough, though, in commercial situations, they always get in,
Oh, okay.
and then the natural enemies can't get in.
Then the damage
Yeah.
will
Yes. So there's a lot of biological control work going on to introduce them. And there's things they call aphid banks.
What do they call it?
Aphid banks.
Oh,
So it's you can get them in pots,
Yeah.
and it's got a few different species of plants in and aphids, parasitized aphids,
Yeah.
so that you can put them in there and the parasitoids will emerge. And yeah, there's there are pheromone traps for other species. I think it's lutescens. There's a pheromone trap for them. They'll bring them into the tree. Was it you talking about that? Someone was talking about the lure. The pheromone is very good at bringing them into the tree, but they don't like going into the trap or onto the trap. We trialled some. I've worked with them with DPI. I've collected the data before I put the traps out and counted them, but they put them on flat card now because they just don't like going in anything.
Yeah.
So someone was saying, I can't remember who it was now, it's only recently, that the best way to manage it they found is to have a tree, a sacrificial tree where you put and then you have a systemic insecticide in it.
Yeah.
So they're just attracted to that tree. It makes sense.
Get the crappy avocado that nobody wants to eat.
Yeah.
Sell them to the
Yeah.
shops.
Yes. No, but make that the sacrificial tree. And,
Yeah. I think you'd have to be really careful with withholding periods and things like that. It is a good point about, there's
That's
some
if you were
fairly
gonna
strict.
spray, but
Sorry?
that's if you were going to spray.
Look, if you attract them into a tree and they breed up, they'll spread.
Okay.
So the idea behind that was to have a sacrificial tree with a systemic insecticide in it.
Okay.
But I don't know what insecticide they were particularly talking about. But
and
there's
you can put the insecticide on the trap or something.
like I say, the lure they have will pull them into a tree, but they don't like going into a trap. They've had sticky traps,
Yep.
and you know, they'll catch a few.
Yep.
But the real value of that is really hard to say. I actually did a vacation scholarship in between third year and honours on spotting bugs, so it would have been Amblypelta lutescens in macadamias, and I worked out the economic threshold in macadamias, and that was half a bug per tree. So that's one bug in 2 trees is enough to give you enough loss to warrant a spray. And they're highly mobile. They're native, they're highly mobile, and they're very difficult. They're actually a very impressive beast. Yeah, as much as, you know, they made my life difficult, they are pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, I have a question. Systemic insecticide, what does that?
It's something you can spray on or treat the soil, and it's taken up inside the plant.
Okay.
They're
Okay.
yeah.
So
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so that would be a sacrificial tree,
Yes.
and so you wouldn't eat any.
No,
of
no,
the tree.
absolutely not.
Yeah.
Well, they use systemic insecticides in some of the stuff you buy in the shops. So it's all about withholding periods and minimum residue levels, and you know, there's a lot of work gone into it. But it does seem a funny way to grow food.
Yeah.
If you don't, unless you have to.
Yeah.
I mean, farmers, I reckon, have got one of the hardest jobs there is.
Yeah.
It's one of the most important jobs. They're all growing our food, and yet they're left to the vagaries of the economy,
Yeah.
and that's what drives it. They get paid once a year, some of these guys, and yeah, got to cut them a fair bit of slack, I reckon.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
Mm.
the big supermarkets like Coles and Woolies, they've got zero tolerance on
Yep.
insect
Oh,
damage.
yeah.
to fruit.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So if you
So
want
what
to
choice do you have?
if you want to sell your product to them, you've got to use.
Well,
Yeah.
to be honest, the choice we have is to go into Coles and say, I want some second grade fruit, please,
Yeah.
and I'm prepared to pay for it.
Yeah.
Well,
If
they're
we-
doing that a lot more now, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, we should be pushing it. If every time you went in there, you took your stuff out of that bloody styrofoam packaging and gave it
Yeah.
back to them, and take your own bags and tell them you would rather have some second grade fruit, and if everyone did that, the pressure would be gone.
Yeah.
One of my it's not a hobby, it's something I would like to find the time to do, is to work out how much pesticides, how many pesticides are applied for cosmetic reasons. It would be scary, because people sheep, and we go into the supermarket and we buy bananas that are that long and exactly the right colour, and they just don't taste of anything.
Yeah. No, you're right.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where's Jason?
Yeah, that's about it from me. I don't know if anyone's got any more questions.